being hosted at the training school, Gertrude's Children's Hospital, Institute of Child Health and Research, and we are really honored and excited to have you as our guests today. So first things first, if you want to use the bathrooms, you'll just leave the webinar hall, walk straight ahead. On your right, you'll find both the ladies and the gents. I'll take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Ngwiri, who is the head of our clinical services, to be able to welcome us to today's webinar. Online team, I hope and believe that you can all hear and see us. Karibu, Dr. Ngwiri.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, both physical and online. I want to welcome you to Gertrude's Children's Hospital and to this webinar. It gives me great pleasure to be amongst you as a clinical research fraternity. As you know, of course, Gertrude's is a hospital and was not primarily founded as a research organization. But over the course of our work as a hospital, we found that we attend to a very large number of patients, of children specifically, and in the process we have come to gather large volumes of data, rich data that is very systematically collected and archived. Now, because of that, it has been found that this source of data can actually be used for analysis and to actually generate new knowledge that can be beneficial to our patients, both present and future, and for the community at large. So it's good that there's been an intersection between research and research organizations and hospitals such as ours, because we think that there is a lot that we can leverage, the expertise within the research community, and then the large amount of data and information that hospitals like ours hold. In the process, I think you will build very useful partnerships and you will generate new ideas which you can utilize for betterment of care. As a hospital, I want to commit to support the research process for those who wish to conduct research in this hospital, for those who wish to partner in various ways, the ones who want to utilize the facilities like the diagnostics, like laboratory that we actually open because we believe that it's a service that's for the betterment of humanity. So I want to encourage you all to collaborate. I think the era of competition has been replaced by the era of collaboration, and that you will find meaningful partnerships that can drive research and in the process improve clinical care. So I wish you a good evening and a good webinar.
even as we continue with this journey, our aim is to just be able to contribute to this percentage and have the growth of clinical research within our region. So I think the other next slides are mainly just about the benefits of joining CRSK and also how you can become a member. But allow me, because of time, not to go through these slides, and I'll just welcome you to come to our website, visit our website, get to learn more about CRSK, understand how you can become a member, and any further information, please do feel free to reach out to us. So again, I'd like to welcome back Gertrude's Children's Hospital. They are our partners today. Just to mention that having webinar series is part of the activities that take part in, that we do in our society, and so we're happy to partner with you guys today. I hope everyone will enjoy this session, for it to be impactful and informative to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rose, for that introduction of CRSK. Can I have the image up? Right, so next I'll just take you briefly through the history of clinical research, especially clinical trials at Gertrude's, and then I'll be able to welcome and this is just a brief summary of how far we have come. It's been quite a journey, and it's been a journey of pure growth. So far we have been able to take part in a total of 16 clinical trials, 2 phase 1 studies, 4 phase 2 studies, 8 phase 3 studies, and 2 open label extension studies. We also have ventured into primary research studies that are non-RCT, and we have based these on various centers of excellence within the hospital. As we speak, we're currently focusing on 11 core centers of excellence, and these are pediatric hemato-oncology, neurology, respiratory medicine, ENT, endocrinology, gastroenterology, nephrology, audiology, cardiology, and cardiac surgery, general surgery, and specialized surgery. We have other specialized areas such as dermatology and others that have not been listed as the centers of excellence or focus as at the moment, but that we also engage in several studies about. Besides clinical research studies, we also do other operational research studies to help us improve quality of care within the hospital, patient safety within the hospital, and other operational activities. So those are our partners that you can see below there in various studies that we've participated in. This point, I will welcome Dr. Simba to just take us through a brief presentation on leveraging routine data for clinical research. Karibu.
Thank you so much. Just pick the point and I can advance the slides. So I'm going to probably start us off on the side of the data that has been alluded to, that I'm able to advance from myself. Maybe just advance from that side. So I'm going to start with the fact that there's a lot of data, as Dr. Gwira has actually mentioned, which is within the system. And the issue is that primarily people used to separate clinical work from research work. And therefore, that I think an impact even in how people are trained. So people are trained to believe that there is clinical, which is on this one side, and then the other side there is research that needs then to be done separately. But you realize that when the patients come into the facility, a lot of data is actually collected as that patient goes through the system. And therefore, we have a lot of data that we collect without thinking about it, and the widespread adoption of electronic health records, there is a great opportunity to use this data to advance research and therefore be able to have impact on our patients. At Gertrude, and this has already been alluded, the hospital sees about 350,000 children per year as outpatient, with about 10,000 children admitted each year. And the current EMR has been in the facility for more than 10 years now, with encounters that range upwards of 10 million, meaning the patients who have come to the facility, well, there might be fewer than that, but the patient has come in so many times that you can actually walk a journey of that particular patient, and you can pick so many patients, and therefore we kind of have a cohort data, and you know a lot of data in the world is based on cohort studies, which are population based or facilities use them. And so from whatever we have so much data that you can look back and be able to analyze and get a few things. So there are many things that this hospital has done. There are several case reports. There are quite a number of my colleagues who have actually done case reports. I just picked one to highlight there, which was done by Anne Irungu and Dr. Ogulo, among others. But and also a lot of abstracts have been presented within conferences and the clinical trials, which I will not be the one mentioning so much about the clinical trials. My colleagues will prosecute that part appropriately. So I'm just going to use an example of a study that we have done within the facility, just using clinical data. And this study, which was acute respiratory illness and vitamin D levels, we looked at data retrospective for patients who had been seen, were admitted within the hospital between January and December 2023. And these patients had presented acute respiratory illnesses, and they had a vitamin D test done. So the results were available to us. And within that, this slide is a bit busy, but I just want to highlight the fact that we are able to extract so much data which is already embedded within the system. For this particular work, we were interested in social demographic details of that particular patient, vital signs. You can see we looked at so many things, including blood pressure, oxygen saturation, their respiratory rates. We looked at whether they had added sounds within that patient they presented. They have added sound, either wheeze, ronchi, whichever nomenclature one had used, and a lot of things, including diagnosis, laboratory tests. Looked at their white blood counts, their CRPs, their platelets, anything that we wanted for that particular work, we were able to get, including did they require oxygen, did they go to ICU, if they went to ICU, did they require to be on a ventilator, and you are able to get that just from a routinely available data, and the outcome and the level of severity for the illness. So this is just an example, and through that we have a few outputs. For example, we have an abstract that we presented at the European Respiratory Society meeting, which was in Vienna within early September. And so even for the fun of it, if you are interested in doing, because sometimes people ask ourselves, why do we have to do research? Why there are so many things, including if you want to travel, but importantly to improve patient care and also showcase what we do, because I think out there the difference between our counterparts in the other side of the world, and that's why you are just seeing the output for research in Africa is so low, not because we have different brains, just because people elsewhere have discovered the art of just documenting anything that you have come across, and other people can be able to learn from it, because sooner than later a good number of us will leave this world, and then what will we have left? We probably need to pass our information to the other people so that then they can benefit from. And here we have worked with her in that project, also did an abstract and presented an oral abstract within the Kenya Pediatric conference earlier again this year. And this work, we are just at the tail end of having submitting the manuscript for that work. But then now doing the great routine data and the trials. So there's a lot of information, and there are systematic review. For example, there's a systematic review looking at using routine health information data for research in low and middle income countries. And then this paper, which I'm quoting here, which is a straight one of my mentors, realizing the full potential of data-enabled trials in the UK, a call for action. So basically, what people are now looking at is that people are moving from having fresh data collected, looking for patients who have never probably been in contact with any institution, to using the clinical information you have and then assign patients for whatever trial you want. And there are many aspects into angles into how you can do that particular, and which I'll probably just come back to it as I do the conclusion. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that clinical care should not be viewed different from research. So we probably need to integrate these things, and moving forward we need to stop separating research from clinical care, because in essence what the curiosity, the people who have discovered the new condition, for example when COVID-19 came, the person who discovered that, they just had some bit of curiosity how the patients were presenting, and they were offering clinical care, and from that a lot of papers have come on COVID-19. Routine clinical data can enable us make the appropriate hypothesis. It's from doing several observations within the routinely available data from the patients you are seeing every day that you can be able to ask yourself a question. Like I'm asking myself a question in the respiratory field. We know, for example, and my colleagues have done some work where they did a large trial to look at, do antibiotics matter when you have a severe pneumonia? And they actually found in that study, which the preliminary results have been presented in conferences, that it's probably like tossing a coin, whichever antibiotic you put a patient on. And so it appears that's not the problem. So what could be the problem? So some of us are asking ourselves, could it be the nutritional aspects of this patient? Could it be other aspects? And so those are the reasons. For example, I want to have my colleague Dr. Gwiri and others, and they are part of my core authors in these papers, looking at could it be the other things like vitamin D or anything else that someone can think of. So further, currently the move now is towards using the routine clinical data as part of trials. So people are defining protocols. So you want to do a protocol on a clinical trial. So you look for the clinically available data and try to test whether your protocols are actually going to work. So if I'm going to want to recruit 20,000 patients, for example, is it feasible within the institution? So you can use the data that is available to try and answer that question. The other thing is that now people are moving to, you recruit patients based on what is already known. So my mentor in UK is doing currently a study on mild asthma, and they will pick patients who are presented to hospitals with mild asthma and eventually categorize them, and now they are subsequently randomized to the arm for the treatment they would want them to be on, and then assessing outcomes. So the outcome of interest which you would want, for example, you'd want to see, do patients improve in terms of pneumonia or whatever other illness after your intervention? Then how best can you do that is actually by following those patients and looking at the clinically the routine available data within the facilities they visit to answer the questions you have. So thank you. I'll stop at this point. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Simba. At this point, I would request that we give Dr. Gwiri, Rose, Dr. Simba, and Hannah a big thank you once again. So at this point, I would like to invite our panelists, and then we will have an engaging session. So our first panelist is Dr. Justus Simba. Dr. Justus Simba is a consultant respiratory medicine specialist at Gertrude Children's Hospital. He earned his MBCHB in 2007 and MMed in 2014 from Moi University. Dr. Simba is actively involved in undergraduate and postgraduate medical training and conducts private practice across Nairobi. At Gertrude's, he serves at the Medicines and Therapeutic Committee and conducts research leveraging hospital routine data. His interests lie in evidence-based medicine, particularly in pediatric respiratory health and advancing child health in Kenya. Currently, he's the Vice Chairperson of the Kenya Pediatrics Association. He's also a member of the Respiratory Society of Kenya, the Pan-African Thoracic Society, and the European Society, the European Respiratory Society. What you may not know about Dr. Simba is that he fears chameleons more than snakes, and that is a true story. Karibu sana, Dr. Simba. Next on the panel, I will have Dr. Doreen Karemi. He's a pediatrician with a deep commitment to improving outcomes for children with cancer and blood disorders. her passion was sparked during her residency at University of Nairobi, where she observed poor outcomes due to late diagnosis and limited treatment facilities. She completed a 2-year training program through a twinning initiative between Jimma University and Aslan Project, which is a US-based NGO focused on building capacity in treating pediatric blood disorders and cancer in LMICs. Dr. Mutua is dedicated to raising awareness about childhood cancer, and I believe we can all attest to this, emphasizing early detection, treatment guidelines, and better outcomes. As an avid researcher, Dr. Mutua has been involved in multinational clinical trials on sickle cell disease since 2013, serving as a study coordinator, sub-investigator, principal investigator. She currently leads several investigator-led studies on sickle cell disease and childhood cancer. One fun fact about her is that when she's not seeing children with cancer, she's actually baking. Yeah. So our next panelist is Dr. Hilda Sirma. Karibu sana. Dr. Hilda is a medical doctor and a clinical researcher specializing in pediatric rare diseases, particularly sickle cell disease. She serves at Gertrude's as a sub-investigator and clinical trials coordinator, managing phase 2 and 3 trials with a focus on protocol adherence, safety monitoring, and regulatory compliance. As the project manager of Hydroxyurea Fund, Dr. Kipkemoi secured and manages a grant providing free hydroxyurea treatment to underserved pediatric sickle cell patients, demonstrating her expertise in strategic planning, proposal development, and stakeholder collaboration. She holds a Bachelor's of Medicine and Surgery from University of Nairobi and is currently pursuing a Master's in Epidemiology at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. One thing that you may not know about her, that she's faster in water than on land. But I believe, being called Jebet, she's even faster on land than most of us here. Yeah. So, and last but not least, our next panelist is Victory Losh. She wanted to be a doctor when she was younger. So Dr. Losh Victory is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and a certified public accountant. She's the risk and compliance officer at Gertrude's and an active member of the hospital's ethics research committee. In this capacity, she oversees legal compliance and data protection matters, participates in the review and approval of research and clinical trials proposals, ensures adherence to ethics and standards, safeguards participants' rights and welfare, and monitors compliance and regulatory requirements. So what you may not know about Losh is that she started boarding school when she was in class 3. Hannah is, I think you all know Hannah. So Hannah is the moderator for today. I'm a nurse, I'm an epidemiologist, an implementation scientist, currently working at Gertrude's as the research management officer. And at this point, I'd like us to dive into the panel discussion. And I can see our able panelists are ready. So to start us off, they say that clinical researchers' favorite workout is clinical trials run. And this point, I would like us to reflect on your personal journeys. Was it curiosity? Was it a defining moment? Or was it a desire to solve unanswered questions that led you to clinical research? Really, what inspired your involvement in clinical research? Can get microphones for the, or you have them. All right. Another one for the two. Thank you. All right, so Dr. Doreen.
So thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to be in this able panel. As you heard, I've participated in a lot of clinical trials. And initially, I think as Dr. Justus was speaking, during our training, we thought there is the clinicians, then the researchers. And there was no mix of both. So I think that's already a weakness in our education system, that we are not pushed to dive into research, although we are meeting a lot of many things we should be curious about. So soon enough, I had to do my master's project, And that was the first time you were told, start asking questions. What are the things you're seeing around? And then you go and sit in your room and you're wondering, what should I research on? Today you start pneumonia, tomorrow it's diarrhea, then you go to sickle cell. But finally you land on something and you have some experience on conducting research. But still not enough, because the exposure is not still great. But as I went along, and especially having grown in this hospital as a medical officer, and then went on to be a pediatrician and now a subspecialist, there's always that feeling and that push. What research is coming out, and exposures, and that is how I landed on clinical trials. I think I was this young, very eager pediatrician, and I had an interest in hematology, and I landed on Dr. Ngwiri's office and said, I think I've found something that we are calling out for research people. And that is how we started now diving into doing our first clinical research. And you realize that, oh my goodness, this is one of the highest forms of research that you can do, but you need a team. And sometimes we really didn't even know what we were getting into. But looking at it almost a decade later, we have grown immensely. And that is one of the things that actually pushed me to do an MSc in global child health, because I was still looking to see how can I further my research. And a lot of many other investigator-initiated studies that I'm already doing have been actually pushed in that direction because of the interest. So I think a lot of interest. We need to push our young doctors, our young clinicians, keep being curious, keep asking, keep looking, and then try and have a mentorship program that where the older researchers come in and they try and push these young researchers in one way or the other. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Doreen. I hear you say curiosity, interest, passion. Thank you. Losh, as an advocate into the research world, Ethics Research Committee, tell us more.
I think mine was more of a happy accident. I manifested it, as the girlies would say. As Hannah's mentioned, when I was young, I wanted to be a doctor, and then things happened, and then I didn't become a doctor. I became a lawyer, thank God. And then, but that inner child was still looking into health law, so I did a lot of courses on health law, on bioethics. And then when I came into the hospital and discovered there was an ethics committee, I was like, I need to be inside here. So I proceeded. I forced myself into it because, again, curiosity. Yeah. So curiosity, manifesting, happy accident. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Losh. We hear you. Dr. Simba, how about you?
Thank you. So I think for me, for some reason so when I went into medicine and finally agreed I was going to be a medical doctor, so there's a story behind there. I've ended up admiring and being also largely an academician. I think you are challenged by the number of new things that happen, and so that puts you in kind of a reading mood, and most of the time you are probably reading, and as you try to read and you try to see patients who are best teachers who give you another new challenge, and you start asking yourself. So I kind of find myself in that kind of scenario, and through many places where I work or where I've been, I've tried to get that curious. I tried to answer that next question, and the only thing for me is that then you have, as you do that, you have also to try and limit yourself in a particular area. And I guess that's like Dr. Karimi is within hemato-oncology, sickle cell. Even for me, respiratory, there are particular things I'm interested with. Other colleagues are interested in other things, but basically trying to answer that question or that curiosity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Simba. And finally, let's hear from Dr. Hilda before we delve deeper into the panel discussion.
Thank you, Hannah. For me, I'd say I'm very curious and very adventurous. And so my journey began all the way in med school. Realized that there was a whole new world outside of seeing patients one-on-one, and started by indulging in One Health. Once I did One Health, that opened a whole new world. We were able to actually go, carry out a small research project and actually publish, and that was the first encounter I had with research. Post-internship, worked a bit in the clinical setting, moved, also had some experience in the pharmaceutical industry, and then came over to Gertrude's, worked a bit in outpatient, and then decided to get into clinical trials, and I've loved it. I'm still very young in clinical trials, and so there's still a lot to explore, but I think it's just serendipity. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tim. So at this point, as Dr. Karimi had earlier mentioned, we have come from far, and the journey of research, not just at Gertrude's, but nationally, globally, regionally, there are several advancements that have happened over time. So take this to the clinical trials team, Dr. Karimi and Dr. Hilda. Based on your experience, what are the most significant advancements in clinical trials that have happened over the last decade or so?
So that's a very interesting question, because clinical trials have been conducted for very long, but it's only maybe in the last decade or slightly over the last decade that we have had clinical trials in low and medium income countries, and especially sub-Saharan Africa. And I think it stems because most people imagine that we don't have proper health systems, we might not have good health records, we might not be able to have proper or reliable internet to be able to connect and send data. They're worried about our regulatory bodies. They're worried about, for example, will we have the clinical expertise? But as it would, there are certain diseases that are found in certain regions, yeah? And probably, and I love the push that has been, if a certain disease is in a certain region, we need to have that region represented. And I think that is really what has pushed most of the multinational, most pharmaceuticals to actually look towards our region. And I know sometimes their greatest fear is, will you be able to generate? Because what they are looking for after patient safety is quality data. Will you be able to generate that? And quality data has many, many things, from how you handle the patients, how you handle, if you're going to take clinical specimens, if you're going to have medicines or investigational products administered, will you be able to do it? Will you be able to follow? Because I can tell you, clinical trials are extremely rigorous. Will you be able to actually do the job? And what I can always say is, yes, we can. And I think it really also did surprise us in 2012, 2013, when we had this clinical trial come in, and it came in through one of our clinicians who, they really didn't want to do it in a private hospital. They wanted to do it in the national hospital, but they didn't have the right systems or the setting to do it. So she said, why don't you try this children's hospital? They have an EMR, they have a very responsive admin system, they have an ethics committee. Why don't you try it? And so we took it up. And as I said, we really did stumble on it, and we were able to go through it. And through that, then we've been able to build a team. Remember, you cannot do it alone. You have to have a team, and your team has to keep training so that they grow, and then create systems that will enable you to actually generate that data. Now, the other thing that you must have is you also have to have the patient, because if they are looking for certain to try a investigational product and it's for a specific disease, if you're really not seeing that disease, then you probably might not be able to qualify for that clinical trial. And that's why that hospital data is extremely important, because you have those patients, but when they come to you, they want to really know, do you see these patients? Do you have sickle cell patients? Do you have patients who have pain? So how will they get that information? From your records. So you have to go back again to to that hospital data that Dr. Simba was talking about. But all I can say is that yes, we can. We have participated in trials, and we are not probably the only hospital. Several hospitals in Kenya are already participating, and we can do it, but we must work into our system so that they enable us to generate quality data, and most importantly, make sure that our patients are still safe. And we cannot bury our heads under the sand. We must participate. We need data. We need, when we see this medication, has it been tried in not black people? We want to know African black. Have they been represented? Yes, because they are there, isn't it? Yeah? And we can do it. So it's to encourage you that yes, we can.
Thank you, Dr. Karemi. Do you have any additions? Very comprehensive, thank you. And now that you mentioned routine data while you were discussing this subject, I would like maybe Dr. Simba to take us through how can we leverage this routine data for clinical research?
So basically, so there's a lot of, so the way to look at it is that first you have ready information. And I think Dr. Karimi, as Dr. Karimi has just mentioned, just setting up a clinical trial, starting it off is not an easy thing. So I'm involved in another facility where we're trying to do a study on preterm babies. And just that process of setting up that unit and to have people aligned because in a county facility is not as easy. So if you are able to have data that is available, that has been collected with the rigor that is required as the patient care in a facility like this, where a lot of checks, quality assurance, I can see people working quality assurance in the audience, who make sure that things are done the way they are supposed to be done. So that means you have actually quality data that you can actually use to make decisions and be able to answer some of the questions. And and I think Dr. Karimi has also mentioned the fact that you actually need to be able to show, the problem is usually sometimes when you have not written a simple thing on a paper called a publication, you can't actually say it exists. So you have to, if you don't have a publication, the only thing is, can you have an EMR system that probably you can be able to show these are the numbers I have, so that then you can be able to answer the questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Simba. And at this point, I would like to request Dr. Hilda to give us a real-world example or a practical example on how they have used routine data to leverage or to enhance the clinical trials research process.
Thank you for that question. So one of the main things we do here, as we have had our clinical trials over there from 2012, thanks to our electronic medical system record, we're able to actually have our own database of our clinical trial patients. And what this means is every single person in this hospital is involved in the clinical trials, whether directly or indirectly, starting from the doctor at outpatient who sees the patient. Because the moment the doctor sees a patient, records every single thing, every single detail, that is what we use, because we'll actually get demographics from there, we'll get the medical history from there, we'll get the social history, we'll get how this patient has been, what medication they've been on, and that is evidence that we actually need. Because one thing you'll notice in clinical trials is that documentation is so important, and patients who are actually eligible for clinical trials might miss out on being part of the clinical trials due to lack of documented data. And that is one of the biggest challenges we face at the moment. Because as we all know, healthcare is not equal all over. Not all hospitals have an electronic record. Our patients may be coming from a low resource setting, and therefore they come and tell us, yes, we've had these episodes of vaso-occlusive, we've had pain, but nothing is documented. And for clinical trials, for us to determine eligibility of this patient, we have to show proof. And so when there's no proof, because there's no documentation, patients miss out on the drug. They miss out on participation. And so I want to encourage every single person listening who has any interaction with any patient, be it a medical doctor, a clinical officer, write every single thing down. Even though you don't have an electronic record, put it down on paper, document it very legibly, very clearly, because that could be the determining factor for whether a patient gets into a trial or not.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hilda, for that. And just to add, there's a very critical stage in clinical trials called pre-screening. And pre-screening majorly relies on routine data for us to assess eligibility and also just know if this study will really be a success at a site or not. So I believe that integrating routine data into clinical research is not without challenges. We could think of practical privacy issues, data protection concerns, and so on and so forth. So at this point, I would like to ask our advocate, Losh, what are the practical challenges of integrating routine hospital data into clinical research design and execution?
Thanks, Hannah. Every single day when I'm at my desk and someone wants to use routine hospital data, or there comes a data protection question, I think I get mini heart attacks because the data protection concerns in the healthcare setting, it's like walking through a minefield at times. We've set up very robust systems at the hospital, but even then, one of our greatest challenges, because when you think of data protection, one of the key principles of data protection law is purpose limitation. So when someone is going into a hospital, they're coming to treat like some simple ailment, you've not clearly stated out that you're going to do research. And it's kind of concerning to tell them blanket that we'll do some research on your data, and you've not specified what research you want to do, because the use of routinely collected data is, you're saying, at one point, 30 years from now, we might want to use your data for statistics. So from a data protection angle, it kind of gives me discomfort. The case I'd give, and there's a very interesting case on using quote-unquote routine, because what is routine changes from time to time. You should look into the case of Henrietta Lacks. If you've not heard of the case of Henrietta Lacks, this is and it has many issues, but part of it is data protection. This lady went into a hospital, and her cells were collected, and then she was treated. Everything went well. But then the doctors noticed, oh my God, these cells keep growing. What is happening? And then they looked into it, and it was part of a lot of cancer research uses Henrietta Lacks cells. But this was quote unquote routine hospital data. But right now, they're very the family is still struggling, trying to litigate the use of Henrietta Lacks cells, because what do you mean? Because you see, if you're using my grandmother's cells, you're kind of using my DNA data. So routine hospital data gives me a lot of research, and clinical trials gives me a lot of data protection concerns. So I'd say that is part of my key concerns, but not the only concern, but part of my key concerns. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Victory. And we've heard from the advocate's perspective. Before we delve into what solutions we have, what options we have for solutions, I would like to also hear from the clinical teams. Dr. Simba, what do you have to say about the practical challenges of integrating routine hospital data into clinical research design and execution?
Okay, thank you. So the challenges around the routine data is the quality. So the issues is about if you go into a database where people answer the question to fill, sometimes human beings are human beings, and sometimes they will just put something there because the system has been put in such a way that you can't go to the next tab before you put something. So if the person decides to be putting a hyphen or a dash, then when you come to analyze that data, then you are going to have issues. And that becomes, because the purpose for collection of the data, the person who put that data, their mind didn't have anything to do with. This can be analyzed later for a particular purpose. So that the quality of data becomes the issue. I know the law talks about and I know the ethics, how we frame the things about the waiver of consent, especially if we are not now talking about the tissues, because I think if anytime you are getting a tissue from a patient, I think it's clear that you have to put that disclaimer or something about what can happen. And I think that's maybe, I want to believe that's where the case you are quoting is around. But in terms of in terms of advancing medical knowledge, and I guess that's why the issue about if it's not practical for me to get consent to this information, then the ethical bodies, and this is probably for the general, listener, so that someone doesn't live with, maybe we are doing something not right. It's just ethically, then we are allowed to get that waiver of consent to use this de-identified data, as long as when, for example, I analyze the data like the one I've mentioned, there is no place where maybe we will transport names or things which people can then use to be able to link the data. But the main challenge with routine data is the quality of that data. How was it collected?
Thank you so much, Dr. Simba. Clinical trials team, do you have any challenges that you've experienced while trying to use routine data? Dr. Doreen?
I know we had talked about it, but a lot of the times we always say we have to really have our data collected, and it must be comprehensively filled. Remember, for clinical trials, unless it's documented, it's not likely to be admissible. So you might say, this patient, I know they come in with pain, but it's not documented anywhere. So that's a big challenge that we generally have. Then the other one is you need to have a team. And this team will come in from study coordinators to your lab technicians, to the phlebotomist, to your data managers, to EC or your regulators. And these are very, very, very key. And you must keep making sure, even as an investigator or a principal investigator, that your team stays up to date. They're learning. You can hear how many moving targets we have. And even I fear for regulatory bodies, because everything is actually a moving target. What was safe today, they have to judge whether it's still safe maybe in another 10 years. So you have to keep pushing and making sure. And then a lot of other challenges we have is clinical trials are very, very, very highly regulated. And for safety reasons, because the patient is key, and you never want to cause harm, intentionally cause harm. So a lot of the challenges we have as investigators is our relation with regulators. I think sometimes because of maybe the volume or the intricacies that come in, we have delays. And remember, clinical trial space is growing. And every country is now looking into making sure that they are sort of attractive to bring these trials to them. And one of the things they look at is how long does it take you to actually get an approval from your regulators. And if it takes a year in Kenya and 2 months in Uganda or in Rwanda or Ghana, where would you choose? Go to Ghana, isn't it? So we must position ourselves, of course, making sure we never compromise on safety, but leverage on technology and make sure that we can be able to get our regulators giving us responses or approvals or any queries within a certain amount of time that is really acceptable. And I thank God I've participated in with CRSK when we've lobbied a lot of our regulators, and we've brought them to the table and said, this is what is happening in Kenya. Can we change? Because if we don't change, then we risk losing a lot of trials to other countries. Then I really touch on us, because we always talk about them, but us. And I know whenever we are reaching out, and remember, clinical trials are really looking for a very specific type of patient. They need a certain weight, they need a certain age, maybe a number of clinical episodes of this. So sometimes as a hospital, you might not completely have that, and you must collaborate with other people. But when you reach out to a lot of us clinicians, our image is, why are they looking for our patients as guinea pigs? And I say, this is the only way we will know if certain strategies actually work. Some people actually say, I think you're experimenting on our patients, and we really need to change that perception. That clinical trials are really not experiments on trying to see if a patient will really, and in fact, if you really know how a clinical trial is designed, it's into collaborations, but I think we can still do a lot more.
Thank you so much, Dr. Doreen. Maybe as we close this subject, Losh, do you have anything you would want to add?
I think this is from Dr. Simba's point. Please don't be alarmed if you're using routine data for research. Please continue, because it is kind of easy and hard at the same time. It is easier because the law protects data when used in a research context. So to that extent, it is protected. However, just because it is a protected category does not mean that the data protection concerns are less, because healthcare is very sensitive. You don't want to be spreading stories that this person has this and this sickness. So it is kind of easier because it is protected, but also kind of harder. So please continue doing research. I also wanted to mention, because I know this is a case that has happened in Kenya, I might be vague on the exact. There was an HIV/AIDS research that I think began as routine data. They noted, if I'm giving you the wrong data, this is the version lawyers have. So apparently these doctors noted that this category of patients was sort of immune to AIDS. And then, because of that routine, it was a routine study. They noted these ladies from this particular area are not getting AIDS, and that is how the study into the vaccine, AIDS vaccine, started, because it was picked up from routine data. So routine data can be very good. But that case also brought up the issue of intellectual property and the importance of having set out clearly your legal rights as a researcher before you begin the process, because I think many people will assume maybe this will not go too far, maybe there's no intellectual property. But can you imagine, this routine data was the beginning of potentially the AIDS vaccine, and now the Kenyan researchers that were involved, I think this was some early 2000 case, do not have any intellectual property right over the final medication that is going to be produced. So some big corporates are probably going to be getting billions, and then the people who began the research are not going to get anything. And then the other issue with ownership and intellectual property is, can you imagine if it was your data? You're struggling, because these were ladies in some slums. You're struggling, you can hardly afford $1 a day. Your data has been used to get AIDS vaccine, and then you're not benefiting from it. So there are some intellectual property and ownership concerns when it comes to routine data, because when you're using it, you don't think to get to anything, but some of them really pop off and then bring benefit, but not to the people who are involved in the earlier stages. Yeah, so look into those contracts well.
Thank you so much, Losh, for that comment. And now we have discussed challenges that we face in leveraging routine data for clinical research. I would like us to explore a little bit about the current landscape regarding open data sharing. As Dr. Karemi mentioned earlier, is sometimes we have a clinical research study here, we don't have eligible participants, and we look to we explore other facilities to get eligible participants. So what is the current landscape of open data sharing? Because this patient who has been seen in another facility, this other facility may require some data to be able to assess eligibility of these participants. So what is the current landscape, and how can we overcome the existing hurdles to leverage on hospital routine data for clinical research? Dr. Hilda.
Thank you for that question. I think part of it, I'll also revert it back to our advocate. But one of the main things that we're having is there's nothing that exists at the moment that allows sharing of electronic medical data across the hospitals. There's no safe way of sharing data in this sense. And so this is something that maybe you can allude to in terms of how can we safely share our electronic medical records between hospitals, not only for purposes of clinical trials and data for research, but also for continuity of care for our patients, because at the first and foremost, our patients are at the forefront, their safety, the benefits that comes to them first, and then now for the research work. So how can we, the big question is, how do we set up a system that allows us to safely share our data across the different hospitals' databases?
Thank you, Dr. Hilda. I don't know if other panelists have anything to add on that. Dr. Simba?
Thank you. I think it had already been sent to the lawyer. You know, the lawyers are learned friends, so usually they but I think I'm aware the part of the initiatives I think the government wants to do is to make sure at the end of the day that we are going to have systems that are interoperable. The IT guys would correct, but I think I am aware of that is where the government sees the things going to, and part of the numbers which you are flying around and which I think some people went to court to stop and everything were also meant to make sure that eventually your data is like will synchronize to whatever you do, because really at the end of the day I think to be honest, today I saw a patient here, and I think they are from another country, one of the advanced countries, and they actually logged into their son's data in that country to confirm the drug the son uses, because they wanted to tell me the name. And I think that's where we want to make sure that data, because really there is no point of the patient struggling. For me in respiratory medicine, I have decided to be telling people, is it the blue or the whichever color, because it's a bit easier for mothers to remember things that way, as opposed to asking them the names which nobody told them, even the name they gave on the other. So, but I think the government is working towards making sure that in future, whichever EMR you are approved to use must be able to synchronize with others. That's what I think I'm aware of. Thank you.
To support Dr. Simba's point, yes, I think this has been work in progress, and most recently the Digital Health Act, which came about, now puts this into law. The government wants to centralize electronic records, and they want to digitalize the health records. That being said, it is a right. Somewhere in the laws, in the Data Protection Act, you have a right to data portability. So technically, every single hospital should be able to put a patient's data in a portable form and be able to give that patient that data. So this is like looking externally. If we need a patient's data and they've been going to a hospital, the law says that this patient has a right to data portability, and therefore that hospital should be able to give them their data in an accessible form. Whether that happens, I think is a whole different thing. Internally, our data protection policies and regulations, we don't do inter-hospital transfers. We'll give, the patient can ask for their data, and we'll give them their data, and then they can give it to the other side, because you can share your data between hospitals, and then the patient sues you for a very huge amount of money. But that is not the only way data transfer happens. I think data transfer happens in very subtle ways, because I have strong suspicions that maybe once in a while, maybe not a doctor here, maybe a doctor somewhere else has written to their friend on WhatsApp, I have this patient whose conditions are this, and this. So that's data transfer. You've shared a patient's data to a whole other entity that they're not dealing with. So I think there are soft transfers or things that we don't think of as transfers that happen that can land us in trouble, but internally the hospital does not do transfers across facilities without patient consent.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. Yeah, I think open data sharing is still a big elephant in the room, and it's something that I think in future it's an advancement that would like to have protected, controlled, of course, with all confidentiality and privacy factors factored in. I think it will be a plus and a very important or good advancement in the clinical research industry. So I think now we cannot talk about open data sharing without speaking about collaborations. Collaborations in research is like a relay race. Just don't drop the data button. So my question to the panelists, how can hospitals, academia, research organizations, and private sector collaborate more effectively to harness routine data for impactful clinical research? I know we have touched on it a little bit, but if we have something that we can add, especially in terms of collaboration, that will be helpful. Dr. Doreen?
That's a fantastic question, and looking even at the audience here and knowing everyone who is logged on, we are here because we are stakeholders to clinical research. And my take and really my encouragement to you is don't let that data not count. Make that data count. And since you know certain things might probably be working best if we are collaborating as institutions, as clinicians, as clinics, because you can collaborate on various levels. Please let us not view ourselves as competitors. Remember, at the center of the work is our patient. And with that patient, for us to make the best decisions about that patient, we need data. So let us get to a point as a Kenyan Research Society where we are very open to collaborate. For sure, have your restrictions. Put them down. Know what you can and you can't do. But please let us share data, because without data, I can tell you, for example, even in childhood cancer, we walk in and you're trying to negotiate for certain resources. And you as a childhood cancer team, you're coming with your little numbers, and they're looking at the adult cancers, and they're wondering, we can treat 1 million breast cancer patients, we can treat 1 million prostate cancer patients. How many leukemias do you have, Daktari? And they say, oh, we have 20. And 20 doesn't look like a very big number, isn't it? So even you as a person who is giving resources, what will you do? You will give resources where you feel they will have the greatest impact, isn't it? But what if, as collaborating institutions, we bring our data together and we have this information, and we can be able to have power in that number. Power of that data is now speaking volumes, because these are things that we have to win piece by piece. And I'm saying, please, if you have an opportunity, we reach out to you. Just look into the facts. Come up, don't come with any, I always say jaundice because I'm a hematologist, but don't come with biases, yeah? Come with a clean slate, listen, see how you need to protect yourself, put it on the table, but let's remember, let's put the work on the center, and the work at the center is the patient, and they have data. We need that data to make the best clinical decisions for them. So however you can collaborate, please be open to doing that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karimi. We are currently living in the era of Internet of Things, and we cannot leave this panel discussion without mentioning something about artificial intelligence and the role it plays in clinical research. There's a random quote that says, "Artificial intelligence in research is like caffeine. It won't do the work for you, but it will sure speed things up." So, our dear panelists, what are your thoughts on how artificial intelligence can optimize, how we can optimize it to in the use of routine hospital data for clinical research, or basically how can we optimize AI in clinical research? I'll start with Dr. Simba.
Thank you so much for that, and an interesting discussion has been good. I think for this particular one, I happen to, and I probably not look in that direction. I think as we were starting this meeting, one of the IT people in this audience, they know they have a pending question, and this question is one of the other colleagues who she's online, one of the Gatewoods branches off there, wants to look at some data, and we were asking ourselves, with this 10 million kind of data, and we estimate maybe there is about, say, 1 million for the question we want to answer. You are to look at it from a big data, I mean, those kind of analysis, how much more are we going to answer that question in a conclusive manner? Because at the end of the day, then you will not be talking about the 400 or 200, and so we have to start thinking of these things around the big data, AI, whichever word you are comfortable with. They are a bit different, I think, but remember I've said I think. Since I'm not so yeah, so it's the thing we have to move to. All of us, you cannot be left behind, as in you can't just be counting things one by one, you know, the way you used to do when you were in primary school, put a bit of sticks this side and then cross them, and then so we can't be doing the things. And I'm sure in the next few years the things will have to move, and we'll have to do things from that point of view. So I have no doubt that's the direction things will be going. I am thinking I need to retrain myself, even if it means by my 9-year-old who can do coding, and it amazes me what he can do. Thank you.
I completely agree with you. It almost feels like there was a time if you were told to type, you'd say, no, take it to my secretary, they'll do a good job. I'm interested to know how many still have secretaries to type their work. Most people do their things, isn't it? So I think AI is really going to be. And maybe a week ago, I attended an antimicrobial stewardship webinar, just like this one. And they bring all this data, and they were talking about this AI they can use to actually make sense of that data. And I'm looking at it that you have all these volumes, and a lot of the times, if you ask most of us, why don't you do research? I don't have time. Yeah? So AI is really going to save you time, but it's also smart enough, it's going to help you make sense of that data, isn't it? So anything that will make my life easier, I'm all for it. Anything that will save me time, I'm all for it. So I think we really must embrace technology, specifically not AI, but technology, to be able to make sense, save us time, and be able to do more, be more efficient, use the resources that we have efficiently. Yeah, thank you.
I'll touch on AI in terms of clinical trials. For what I think about AI and machine learning is that the potential is unimaginable. I truly believe incorporating AI and machine learning into clinical trials will make us more efficient, because when you have AI looking at routine hospital data, it means it gets to screen for us things like demographics and all that, meaning it can pick out for us patients who are potentially eligible and potentially ineligible. That saves us time, that gives us more accurate data, and so the efficiency is going to be on another level. So I think that's something we all actually have to learn and embrace very, very soon. Yeah.
Thank you.
Since everyone has praised AI, I'm here to spoil AI's good name. You see, AI does not take its data from heaven above. AI is a reflection of what we already do. I'm a proud member of FIDA. Haki za kina mama, hallelujah. So, from a legal perspective, and currently I think the EU has started it. They are very stringent. Are they stringent? There are some EU laws that have come up to regulate AI. And the same way the GDPR on data protection began from EU and now is here with us, I think very soon the AI regulations will be with us. And there are all these places. I subscribe to paid versions of AI, so I'm a supporter. However, you have to look at the biases that have haunted healthcare. Healthcare is not known. Let me not spoil your good name when you are here. But healthcare has had its biases. You find healthcare, maybe the clinical trials being very oriented towards men, or healthcare being very oriented towards the white population, because when they don't give us medicine, we complain, oh, they never give us the good medicine when it comes about like the Ebola. And then when they experiment with us, we say, oh, they're using us as guinea pigs. So we are not very well represented in that background research. The biases that humans have translate into the biases that AI has. So the concern is when you have a system, you see, we trust AI so much, so much praise for AI, but if you have that halo effect and think it is this whole good thing, and then you apply it to healthcare, where it is a life and death matter, and then those biases are translated. Like now, it is said that when women have pain, there was some research I saw recently that said, I think it was an American study, that when men and women go to the ER for the same level of pain, it takes 30 more minutes to take care of the lady. Like women's pain is underdiagnosed, something. So those same biases are reflected on AI. And you see, Victory can be, maybe Victory does not like a particular type of person. She only affects one person. AI will take that same bias and multiply it 1,000 times. So that is my concern with AI, that all this beauty, but we have to, especially in healthcare, ensure that the biases do not bite, especially at the vulnerable populations. Yeah.
Thank you so much, team, for your thoughts, feedbacks, and inputs on especially the AI. I know what we have said here is just a drop in the ocean. There is more into it. AI is with us, and it's going to even be more. It is just the beginning of a roller coaster of a journey with AI, and we have to put all these things into consideration when we use AI. Of course, there's something that's, someone said that garbage in, garbage out. So if you train it in a certain way, it will give you that eventually. So even as we use AI, I think it's important that we give it a human thought, we reflect on it, but use it to improve and improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of our work, and not just rely on it fully. I think this is a discussion that we may need to have on another panel discussion just for tech in healthcare and in clinical research. CRSK team, may as many as of a similar opinion say aye. Aye. Thank you. And I think at this point we have finally come to the end of this panel. Before I close it up, I would just like a parting shot. 3 words. Please, only 3 words from the panelists.
Integrate clinical care with research. Thank you.
My famous 3 words, yes, we can.
Let us collaborate.
Thank you.
Lawyers cannot use 3 words.
3 words. 3 words.
Where a whole novel would suffice.
3 words.
You see, clinical trials advance the cause of healthcare. So from the legal side, we are very happy to support
Thank you.
I don't have 3 words.
3 words, Zineisha. All right, thank you so much. At this point, I would like to open the floor to questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to engage.
So thank you very much to the panelists. That was a great discussion. So my question goes again to the panelists. So in the field of clinical trials and research, when do we say no? So in some cases you find that you are in the clinic and med reps come and they actually give you, see that there are so many, let's say, antihypertensives. There are so many antihypertensives and they show you very localized clinical trials whereby it shows that their drug reduced nighttime blood pressures by less than 3 millimeters of mercury. A study done in Indonesia, 13 subjects. So at what point in time do we say no? Because you see, these things have money. There's a monetary benefit in clinical trials. Now, as doctors, and we find that we have so many pharma and industry-sponsored trials dangling a lot of resource, and they don't want you to push their product because there's a lot of competition. So you find that there are clinical trials, yes, then you find that they're out there not for the right reasons, but just for marketing. It's more of a marketing gimmick, and you find that there is some bit of evidence that their product is superior at some point in time, but they curate the findings to gear you to prescribe that medication.
Dr. That's a very interesting question and a very interesting perspective, because most of us have met those people you're talking about, the drug marketers, but they have a job to do. Unfortunately, they have learned how to use the data to skew it to their direction. And unfortunately, when you do not know the right questions to ask, then you could actually be swayed in one way or the other. So I think one of the things is that will help you, because you don't want to say no and something is beneficial. And I think you also want to be evidence-based. So what you really must look is for which questions to ask, how to interrogate that data, and really look and be able to see, is this really good advice? And a lot of the times you can take that data and go back again and read some of those research papers that they have published. And some trials, because some of the trials we've actually done have actually been negative trials. And people are very afraid of publishing negative trials. But negative trials are very, very important because they help the next researcher know what not to do. So you stop wasting time, stop wasting resources, and also helps me as a clinician at the end of the day be able to see this didn't work. Why is it now that you want to convince me that your drug does this and doesn't? So I think it's learning, and I think even as a society, if we have more courses that are able to teach us in terms of research methods, how to look at data, how to interrogate it, how to make sense of it. Because I think sometimes it's actually making that sense of that data. To answer that question, you're saying, should I really say no? And when I'm saying no, do I have evidence that really this is not an approach that is? But a lot of the times, again, we have those biases where certain populations were not represented. So when they're not represented, then the jury is out there. And that's why we are really pushing that we must bring these clinical trials here so that then we know, out of 300 patients, how many came from Africa? How many are from Asia? Sorry about that. Yeah. So that then you can make a very good judgment as you interrogate the data. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I don't know, it's comment or question, but we'll figure it out. My name is Virginia, and I have the first comment or question would be on AI. Would using AI to do literature review be termed as cheating in research? And how acceptable is it in the world of academia? The other point would be, how do you incorporate, for example, you are talking about data sharing and how it's challenging across different hospitals. How do you incorporate these other hospitals that present data to you that they're recognized at the end of that research? Because it also feeds into collaboration.
Maybe since I wear art of academia, I can handle that one. So I think AI has come to destabilize what has been there previously. And right now, as a faculty in a medical school, I'm involved in discussion where I'm telling my colleagues we need to think how then do we, because you can't, for example, send an assignment to a student and expect what they have written that it is from their brain. Could as well be just from the computer. And so people are now trying to think also, what do you do with, as academicians, how then do we, moving forward, handle? I think recently, either 2 or so weeks ago, if I'm not, I think last week, I reviewed a paper in one of the big journals, and part of the question there was, have you done the review through AI, whatever, generated review? So as things move, some of the things which appeared very wrong, like that would not necessarily be wrong, but the question is, how have you done it? I'm ready actually to propose in my department students to be allowed to do exams with phones as a medical final year, maybe continuous assessment, and then I see what happens, and we assess. And I have a feeling, because we have tried a method close to that, I have a feeling, and they actually published work. I actually read there is published work to show that open book exams and those kind of things, which a long time ago looked like, what are you doing? Things are moving, and so I don't think it's I would say really is a bad thing, but you have to also check in that institution at this point in time, have they accepted that? Because it's just a transition. Over time, it will be accepted, but maybe people want to check at that particular. The other thing about it, remember what Han said, it can generate anything, remember? So the fact that ChatGPT has given you the answer, sometimes it doesn't mean anything. They might just have given you a wrong answer depending on what you asked. I leave the other question, I think, to clinical team.
Sorry, you might, what was it about?
How, for example, if you worked with a hospital in Homa Bay to get data about patient with sickle cell disease or cancer, how do you then incorporate them at the end of the trial into your, or is it done such that they don't feel like they're just contributing data into the study and then they're not cited anywhere as contributors?
So having experience with clinical trials, what they just need is to know that you have the patient. Majority of the time, they'll need to do that when they send you a feasibility. So you say, yes, we have this number of patients who could meet your criteria, but then we'll reach out to many other institutions. Unfortunately, when the publications come in, because they will be working with several sites, it's very difficult to have everybody represented. So they will have their data there, but internally as a site, you should have mechanisms to be able to recognize them, make sure that you're not just doing research just for research, that you give them that feedback, that with this research now we've been able to actually move this into clinical practice. And fortunately, some of the trials, once some drugs actually show they work, their patients are eligible because they participated in the trial to actually continue receiving the drug for free. So you can imagine that's a benefit also to the patient. So I think it's trying to look for different ways that your collaborators don't end up feeling like you're using them, but always put them to the table and let them understand and let it be clear, because even as an institution, it's not everybody who is going to be put on the paper. But when they choose a site, they choose the site, not everybody else who is actually there. And about AI and doing reviews, I'll just give you a small example. I asked a young man to do a motivation letter. They went into AI, had a motivation letter, and they said, that was quick. And they brought me and they said, yeah, I just need to type in 1, 2, 3 things and say, and I have a whole letter written, and they just edit it and make it smart. And I thought, wow, that's where literature reviews might be. But we can't bury our heads on the sand. I think it's to regulate and make sure that that whatever you're doing is smart. Because the system may generate, but it also has to be checked in so that it doesn't get into the troubles Victory was talking about.
A comment on literature review. and this is from a legal perspective, for instance, on data protection cases, there are cases from like 70 countries. I can't review all of them. Once in a while, I download 70 cases, and if I'm searching for a case on a particular issue, because maybe they're like, I need data portability cases from the Southern Hemisphere, I'm not going to go through every African country's, no. I think we have to have space for literature reviews through AIs. As the other panelists have said, there might be a bit of resistance. And lawyers have been caught up in this. There are lawyers who've cited fake cases in actual legal court documents and landed in trouble because they didn't counter-check what the AI said. The AI came up with fake cases. So use it with caution, but I'm personally a highly pro-AI person, but with caution. I wanted to comment on using marketed drugs for clinical trials. I think I've not encountered this because I'm not in the trials team, but I'd want to know who else has approved this drug. Because if you tell me the FDA has approved this drug, I'm more than happy. I'll experiment on it. But if you tell me this has not been approved even by the PPB, then I'll have some question marks. So I think we have set up certain structures within society or within we've set up some systems to be able to check whether drugs, the efficacy of drugs, or whether they're safe. And I'd want to see if it has passed through those safety nets first. Two, I think I've found that the medical profession and even the legal profession is very consultative. So I've seen people ask Dr. Angwiri some questions if I'd want to review. And then we have the ethics committees. Once in a while, I sit in the Gertrude's Ethics Committee. Once in a while, certain questions come to us on issues, including those, like whether, because that would be an ethics question. Should we administer this kind of drug within the hospital? And all the clinical trials that are done within the hospital have to pass through the ethics committee. And this ethics committee has a very broad user base. So there has to be a layman, there has to be, it's not only doctors. So we'll ask all the silly questions. We'll ask, na hii ni dawa ya kuponya nini? We'll ask the basic questions. So taking it through I'd say take it through the processes, or check what are the processes that has gone through before it reached you. Yeah. But I'd take the practical advice as well. But my legal theoretical would be what processes has it gone through before it got to you.
Thank you so much for the answers. Just to add, for AI and literature review, you have to validate, because once you publish that data, you will be accountable for whatever you write there. If it's false information that is published, you will be the one who will suffer, not the AI. So I think validate. You can use AI, but make sure you validate that whatever you are referencing, whatever you are writing in your literature review is actually correct. I think I'll give one last question to the physical. Okay. Question? So who raised their hands first? Who is helping me check? So we head to, okay. Let me give a gentleman. I had a gentleman, a lady, a gentleman.
Thank you. My name is Benny. My question basically is more on data. I understand we don't have that good centralized data repository or data centers in Kenya, whereby we can have for clinical research. The question basically is, do we have a way forward for that? Because as Dr. Simba was talking on his highlight at the start of it, was talking of how the modernized or the first world are ahead of us in the aspect of data being accessible in quality measure, because the all essence is the quality bit. So what's the way forward? Having a centralized repository or a data collection area whereby I can be able to have my data there and it maintains its quality, because now oversharing or having it elsewhere might liquidate it or make it dilute and lose the quality bit of it. And this will help also with the quality and what the other thing, the data protection of a bit of it. So I don't know how you view that and the way forward for that in Kenya.
I'd first begin from the legal perspective. I think this is a data integrity question. I'll borrow from the Americans have the HIPAA law, and whenever their health records are, I'd say, accessible to a large group of people, but they can trace whoever has logged into your data. So if I log into your portal and I don't, like, medical professionals can log into your data and see what is happening. But if you log in without good reason, then they are very stringent. You can get fines, you can get imprisoned. So they are very strict. I think one of the measures that is used is just very strict laws on interfering with someone's health records. I can't talk on what the government has planned. The government already, the evidence kwa kalatas is that the government is setting up a centralized system, or they're going to try to have us have a centralized system. But even if that does not happen, I can speak for Gertrude's, which already has that as plans. Can I speak for Gertrude's? I can tell you that I think Gertrude's, as an example, already wants to put that in place. So I think the private organizations usually champion progress faster than the government. So we might achieve that even before the government does it. So there's some public initiative, but there are also some private initiatives. Yeah.
You know, the challenge is when you ask IT question to medical doctors. But I think the challenge was already thrown this side, that maybe the next discussion also need to have IT expert. But yes, I'm aware, because what has been said. What I'll add is I've seen some students who are making something, and they were trying to demonstrate that when you have data, you can actually check where did the alteration come from. And there were, I think, in the HIV world, where a lot of data analysis is advanced in our country, people have made data that you can actually try and see, it is that not this, that there was this alteration, or it is that this, that the merging then brought an issue. And maybe the last thing I would say is that these acts we are saying, they actually currently doing public participation. I think, if I'm not wrong, we are currently the public participation for the digital health, and it's actual regulation. And actually, I think it's a good point for all of us to just go and check what is written in there, and maybe voice our concerns, because, as you have said, I think you have brought a very important point. It is likely that if you are going to analyze the whole data eventually, that the data that came good from hospital X or facility whatever, then there's another, or goes from something else, and everything else doesn't work for you. So thank you, and you make a good point. Thank you.
I can also give you one example. I attended a conference, and there were a certain group of people in Nigeria who had come up with a specific application, because the healthcare system is almost similar to ours. Nothing is centralized. And so they came up with an application specifically for their sickle cell patients who every single time they have an encounter with a medical doctor, all their health records are put there. So it doesn't really matter whether they're seen in the north or the south. Wherever they go, there's continuity of care. And so maybe that's something we might need to look into, considering that the government might be a bit slower on the progress of centralization of data. We might have to do it from a private point.
Thank you so much. Our time is far much spent and the discussion is getting more and more interesting. I think at this point we have dinner served and I don't want to be the one standing between you and dinner. And for that fact, I will ask that if you have any question that is not so burning, if you have any questions, you can channel them to my email. I'll share them with the panelists and they'll be able to share, I will be able to share a response with you. My email address is hwanjiko, H for hen. H for hen. I know there's some places where they don't have H and A. H for hen. Wanjiku, WANJIKU @Gertis, GERTIS.org. I believe you all have my email. I've been corresponding with you as part of the organizing committee for this event. Otherwise, I hope and believe there is no burning question. Burning. Anyone? Online team, burning is the keyword. Yeah, I think there's no burning question. At this point, I would like us to give our panelists a special clap, and the special clap will be organized. Yeah, we will give them 4 factorials because they are 4. In factorials, I mean we will give them 4 claps, 3 claps, 2 claps, and finally 1. This is my favorite claps. Those who know me, they know. Let's go. Thank you so much, our panelists. We greatly appreciate your time and the insights you've been able to share with us. I'll invite Maureen to give us vote of thanks, but as behalf of the hosts, that is Gertrude Children's Hospital, we are greatly humbled by your time. Some of you have come from very far, all the way to Muthaiga, Gertrude Children's Hospital. I really appreciate you. Maureen can take over.
Thank you so much. As you have heard, my name is Maureen Nyamboba. I want to take this opportunity to thank you so much, our panelists, for such an insightful and rich conversation. Nothing excites me, and I believe our generation more than data and AI. Yeah, thank you so much. I would like to thank the organizing team at Gertrude's, led by Hannah. Thank you very much for this webinar. And then our CRSK team from the communication team, Joseph and Brenda, asante sana. And our secretariat, our admin, Rose, thank you very much. And also for the dinner, asante sana. Now, I also like to thank our audience, both our attendance audience and our online audience. We appreciate you. And lastly but not least, I would like to thank our ICT team, AD, and the cameraman. Asante sana, tunashukuru. So without any much further ado, I would like to hand over to Gertrude so that we can eat. Asante.
Thank you to Yuri, our ICT support, for being with us and making sure that this webinar runs smoothly. So team, dinner is served. Make sure to know at least 3 people that you do not know from this webinar. Our online team, we have very delicious dinner served. Would love to have you, but because you're far, allow me to wish you bon appetit. You're all welcome.